In relation to our third task, the teaching plan, I want to introduce you to a few ideas that are influencing this and what it is that we're looking for. First thing that I need to point out is we're talking here in broad language. So you will see at times in some of the older material we referred to a whole school approach, and we've changed the language a couple of years ago to be teaching plan. But we've kept both things in conversation deliberately. We've kept them deliberately in conversation because we know some of you will like to think whole school. And what is a whole school approach I can take to dealing with some of the issues that the school I'm working in or thinking about is faced with? And they might be things that range from developing critical thinking across the school, developing school community relationships on a large scale, to whole school things that often come up like breakfast programs and positive welfare programs. Okay. So they're whole school approaches to dealing with some of the sociological issues that impact on your work as teachers. And as a teacher, often you are engaged and leading or designing such whole school things. So we want to give you the opportunity to do that. Now, that was where we used to do the assignment, but a couple of years ago we realised that some of you, understandably and necessarily, also want to focus on my classroom. I'm a grade 3 teacher. I'm a year 9 maths teacher. So what can you do in your grade 3 class? What can you do in your year 9 maths class to overcome some of the issues that you will face on a day-to-day basis in your teaching area? So hence the language of teaching plan was introduced to say, okay, so you're narrowing that down into your particular curriculum area. So when you see the language and wording here, we've tried to pick broad language to denote it can be broad. If we picked only narrow language for your classroom, then that would preclude people from going broad. Now, I know it's a somewhat semantic point, but we're not saying you can't do your classroom at all. It's just that if we end up in a situation where someone's work has to be moderated externally, and we have narrow language, and they've done something broad, then that becomes a problem for that, and we don't want that situation to arise. We really want to say to you, and I guess this is the crux of it, think about school where you have worked or where you may work. Think about some of the issues that are going on and tell us about those issues based on the reading and research, and then tell us how you might engage with that positively and what you expect to achieve by doing that based on the readings and the research. So it's going from your academic essay to here's a scenario, identify what's going on based on evidence, tell us what you might do about it based on evidence. If you do that, you have done the task. That is what we're asking for. Okay? So let's not try to get caught up on some of the specifics of language perhaps, because we're caught up as well ourselves, I guess, in trying to find a language that says that, but in a way that then meets the assessment requirements. So that's really what we're after, okay? When you look at the unit outline, and you pop up here to, the unit outline, which is up over here, you get the unit outline, the assessment task, short essay, teaching plan, okay? Now, you can work in groups if you wish, that's perfectly fine. We just need something from you saying who the group members are so that we understand that. That's risk management to do with the fact that sometimes groups break down. What are we looking at? We're looking at basically you're applying your learning in relation to diversity to designing learning. Okay? So you bring your learning to the unit together with practical strategies to engage effectively with diversity in the classroom. So think about something from prac, could be the scenarios that we use in the class, and then develop a plan for engaging with the issues in your teaching. Now, that can be whole school in your classroom. Notice we are not using the language of an IEP or an ILP. An IEP or an ILP is something you would do in your diversity unit, and it might influence your thinking here, but we're not dealing with particularly. They tend to be located with students who come from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander backgrounds to ensure we're meeting all their needs, and students who have particular physical or cognitive limitations to their learning. So we're not talking only those things. We're talking about students who we often overlook because of the cultural background that they bring. It could be girls, migrant students, non-English speaking background, class is a big issue. whole range of other forms of diversity that we've talked about in this unit. If we talk ILP and ILP, then we're really narrowing that down again to the other issues of diversity in the special ed type space. And we don't want to make that a narrow focus. We're really trying to say here, look, we often in our teaching, that we've been talking about in this unit, miss out on including various forms of knowledge and cultural backgrounds. We want to make sure we do that here in a meaningful way. And it's also not just about that student. Okay? If we only address, it's like Aboriginal education, for example, if we only address Aboriginal education, the Aboriginal students' needs, then we are only addressing that individual. We're not changing the engagement with Aboriginal Australia of others. And all we're doing is reinforcing that separateness. So we engage with Aboriginal education on an individual level, but also on a whole school level. A bit like Harmony Day. We're not talking here about the stupid, let's come and dress up and eat something for a day, and that will include all cultures, because that's total rubbish and not what it's about. It's about including all cultures every day, all day in schooling, all right, and getting away from the sort of stereotypes of food and culture. Or we'll engage Aboriginal kids by playing AFL and doing dot painting, which is just culturally inappropriate for so many people and wrong on so many levels. It's about whole school, consistent, overall engagement. When you scroll down to the assessment week, you'll see there's some task 3 materials here. In there you will find background to the task, some exemplars which are based on large examples. Now they are exemplars because they are ones that have a lot of good qualities, but also longer and bigger than I would probably expect you to do. They're not examples to follow, they're not the best practice, they just have a lot of good elements that are worth discussing, okay? You've got the scenarios that we'll be using, and then we've got the rubric here. So I've opened that already. A bit like we did in the last rubric, we've got the UC descriptors across the top here, and the criteria down the side here, okay? So basically, we're looking at your capacity to use whole school thinking, okay? Now by whole school thinking here, we're not precluding your individual class, but we want to recognise that your class, and if you're your Year 9 Maths or Year 3 class that you're focusing your activity on, that's all good and awesome. But it's influenced by who the students are in your class. That is a whole school issue. That's why it's not an ILP, okay? Because it's about engaging diversity. So that is a whole school approach. It's about understanding that this school is made up of these students. Think the thisness stuff from Pat Thompson and the place stuff. Right? So don't see that as saying, I've got to do a whole school breakfast program or a whole school community engagement. No, you're focusing on the issues that exist in the whole school in your Year 9 Maths class or your Year 3 class, should you wish to do that. That's what we mean by that language. You're demonstrating a capacity to engage with issues of diversity, so you're identifying issues, evidence-based strategies. Okay? The research has shown me that these are issues that exist, and research has shown us that this is what we do in that situation. That's what we're after. Okay? Comprehend key concepts and theories, so again, this is your knowledge side of stuff. Capacity to, so there again, it's excellent understanding of key points and themes, use concepts and theories accurately. Now the thing here is, this is orientated towards a practical end, but it's influenced and based on academic knowledge. I don't need you to reference totally and utterly here. If you say, well, I'm dealing with issues here of social capital, I want to build students' cultural capital to understand the embedded knowledge in the curriculum, I don't need you to go and find references for Bourdieu and Thompson and whatever the case might be. Okay? If you say those things, you're using the language that we know is part of the unit. If you say them and use them correctly, we know you understand those things. That's perfectly fine. Okay? Even if you say, drawing on the ideas of Bourdieu, I don't need you to reference Bourdieu. Using it correctly is what we're after. If you say, I'm drawing on cultural capital ideas to enhance students' understanding of embedded cultural knowledge, and I'm going to do that by dot painting, then I'm going to say you actually don't understand that concept because those two things aren't congruent. So if you know them and use them correctly, you don't need to reference totally, okay? So this is where demonstrated capacity and applied research comes in. but it's also about professional problems. So I observed on prac that a number of students were disengaged. I thought about that and looked at it, and I realised that there was sort of Anglo middle class assumptions in the examples I was using in my classroom. So therefore I thought about including a range of different perspectives on knowledge in my subsequent lesson examples to engage those students. That's what we're talking here about professional problems and using research in an approach that reflects this unit. So that's the rubric that does that. When, you don't need that, that's the wrong button. When you look at the background here, this is just to give you an insight into what we're thinking. And you don't even need to read this if you don't want. It's just so you understand where we're coming from with it. Okay. I guess one of the key things I'd say is that there is no mandatory format or structure. We just want you to think about these issues. We haven't got a performer. It's not a report in that sense. Okay. We use some language in this background document, things to think about, which are just there to help you think through what you might do. Okay. Or they're thinking tools. Okay. These are not about follow these headings and procedures. I know some of you like having that sort of level 1 procedures, but we're at the end of 4th year here. Okay. The situation that we're trying to model is what happens in schools. Principal or deputy says, we've got an issue with engaging these kids. We're going to set up a team, 1, 2, 3, you're on the team. Do some thinking about it, come up with some ideas and plans that we can do here to engage these kids. They're not going to give you a performer to do that. Okay, it's up to you professionally to decide how you go ahead with it. So we don't want to give you a performer, because a performer becomes a straitjacket that you then exist within, and that would again be contrary to the notion of this unit, which is about engaging different and diverse viewpoints. But you'll see there. Actually, I should have better change this. This is from last year. But when you look down the bottom here, you'll see some prompts and thinking tools. So this is just to help you think through. It might help you get your head around the assignment and where we're going with it. Okay. These are just questions. They're not guides. You do not have to answer all of them or any of them really. It's just there to give you some ways of thinking into this task. In the end, the task is, and we'll be doing activities in your class with Jenny around this. It's basically what's going on here? What does the research tell us is going on? What can we do? How's that based up by research? What am I expecting to achieve by doing it? If you do those things, you have achieved this task.